Hi, welcome to Mental Wellness During a Pandemic, a webcast presented by the Regional Learning Center. In this webcast, we will be speaking about the mental health impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as self-care and coping strategies you can use during this challenging time. And so, COVID-19, as we know, is a new virus that emerged on the global scene late last year and is something we're still learning about. It has spread to almost every country in the world, and as such, the World Health Organization has declared a global pandemic. The virus has spread so quickly, and so we've seen governments around the world put in place different measures and take steps to help stop the spread. So, what makes COVID-19 so stressful? We can appreciate that the pandemic measures that have been put in place to help stop the spread of the virus have really turned our lives upside down. They've affected both our home lives and our work lives. In our home lives, simple errands have become big events that require lots of planning and preparation. Things like going to the bank or going to get groceries now takes much longer. And this is in part because businesses are doing what they can to help stop the spread. They're limiting the number of people inside, they're directing the flow of traffic, and taking time to disinfect surfaces. Children are also home from school, and elderly loved ones are home from their usual programming too, adding to the busyness at home. And trying to keep everyone entertained and engaged can be challenging, especially if the primary caregiver is still working their regular hours. We've also begun to rely heavily on technology, as people are working from home and community programming and services are being offered virtually, and even children's classrooms have been adapted to the online world. And this has added to the difficulties in trying to share space, time, and technology amongst everyone who needs it. Physical distancing can be hard too. We're now allowed to gather in small groups, which is great, but we still have to practice that distancing. And as nice as it is to see our family and friends face to face, we can appreciate this isn't possible with everyone. And so this can add to feelings of isolation and those feelings of being disconnected from one another as we're so many months into this quarantine. Financial stress is affecting many as well, as we've heard of many people who have lost their jobs or have had their working hours reduced. And so there's a lot of stress around paying bills and being able to afford necessities like groceries and pay for what was once covered by work benefits, like prescription medications. Many are also worried about getting sick themselves or about family and friends becoming ill. There's also concern about clients and their families' well-being during this time, especially as we aren't seeing each other as face-to-face or checking in as regularly. Many people are also experiencing grief during this time, as they have lost a loved one or know of someone who is ill with the virus. This can be difficult, especially as we've seen restrictions on visitors in both long-term care facilities and in hospitals. And so not being able to see or comfort loved ones during times of loss and illness can be really distressing and difficult to cope with. Some are also grieving the loss of normalcy in our lives. As the quarantine measures have changed what our day-to-day looks like, it's really forced us to adapt to a new normal, which hasn't been easy. There's also been a lot of uncertainty and change since the pandemic measures were first put into place. We've had to continually adapt to a new normal as restrictions are lifted and the situation develops. And although we're starting to see the restrictions lift, there's no clear indication of when things will end and what life will look like when the measures do. So not knowing these things, having all of this uncertainty of what life will look like in the upcoming months can be really stressful, especially as no one seems to have the answers. Our work lives have been affected too. For those who continue to provide essential in-person care, there was and continues to be a worry of contracting the virus and spreading it to others. As in-person care has been replaced by phone calls, video chats, and emails, we've had to learn how to connect with clients and caregivers virtually. We can appreciate that for the majority of us, connecting with clients in this way is new. We never interacted with clients in this way before, and so it took a lot of learning, a lot of trial and error for us to find the best way to support clients in a meaningful way while learning to navigate technology. We've also had to learn to connect with our teams virtually. As many are working from home, team meetings have become video and phone chats to stay updated and support one another. And so checking in with colleagues and reaching out requires more of a conscious effort as we don't see each other in person anymore. And so looking at how our home and work lives have been impacted, we can appreciate this pandemic has been challenging for everyone. It's affected everyone differently and in different ways, but has been and continues to be stressful nonetheless. As there's no clear indication of when things will go back to normal, we need to think about how we're managing our stress now to care for and promote our mental health and well-being as the situation develops. And that's where self-care comes in. When it comes to self-care, these are the things you want to do to help yourself cope during challenging times. And as Linda Monk in her blog from the Crisis and Trauma Institute discusses, you want to think about practicing self-care in a holistic way. So you want to address your self-care in your physical, emotional, psychological, and spiritual domains, as these four areas are all connected and make up your overall well-being. And so when we talk about the physical domain, what we mean here is be active. Being physically active can be challenging as gyms have been closed and we've had to practice physical distancing. And so we had to get creative on how we can stay physically active. Consider walking or exercising in your backyard, or if you're not quarantined, walking in your neighborhood while maintaining distance from others. Many have also turned to online workout videos, and some gyms have been offering online group fitness classes as well. So lots of different options on how to stay active, but remembering to keep your physical limitations in mind, especially if you're trying something new. Making healthy food choices is important as well. It can be tough to eat healthy foods, especially when we're stressed, because we tend to turn to those comfort foods. You know, the foods that are high salt, high fat, high sugar. And so you want to think about making healthier choices because what you eat can actually affect how you feel. And so try to pick the foods that aren't as high salt, high fat, and high sugar, and trying to pick healthier snacks and meals throughout the day. You also want to drink lots of water to stay hydrated. Making time to rest is important as well. Do what you need to do in order to have a restful night's sleep. And this could include practicing a bedtime ritual. It could involve taking a warm bath, listening to some calming music, meditating, reading a book, journaling, whatever that looks like for you. Also try to sleep at the same time every day. This can help you have a more restful night's sleep. And when we talk about rest, we also want you to know that it's okay not to do anything. Some people have expressed that they feel pressure to stay busy or to come out of this pandemic as a new person or learn something new during this time. If you feel this pressure, consider where you're getting this messaging from. Who's telling you that you can't rest and just take some time for yourself? Allow yourself to rest. Do nothing. It's okay. When it comes to your emotional domain, you want to think about using technology to connect with family and friends. So we can appreciate we're now able to see some of our family and friends in person, again, in small groups and while practicing distancing. But we want to think about the instances where we're not able to see some family and friends in person, using technology to continue to stay connected. And so, as we've seen, a lot of people have been turning to video platforms and phone calls, again, to just support one another during this challenging time. You also want to help others whenever possible. Helping others can help us feel like we're making a positive contribution and actually boost us emotionally. And so if you have an elderly loved one or a neighbor, think about reaching out to them and ask them if there's any way that you can help them. This could be as simple as asking if they'd like to add anything to your online grocery order, if they'd like you to run an errand for them, or to pick up their prescriptions from the pharmacy. It can make a world of difference for them. You also want to think about if you're experiencing grief during this time. And it's important to take steps to process your grief. So left unaddressed, feelings of grief can impact your mental and emotional health, as well as your overall well-being. So it's important to do what you need to do to work through your grief, which may include turning to a grief counselor for support. Psychologically, you want to think about checking in with yourself and doing this regularly. During times of stress, we tend to focus on everyone around us. We want to make sure everyone else is doing okay, but we forget about ourselves and we forget that we're human too and that we can be impacted by what's going on as well. And so it's important to ask yourself regularly, how am I feeling today? Is there is there tension in my body anywhere? Am I carrying my stress physically? Am I having aches and pains? Are there certain things that are making me feel stressed at this time? And do I need to make any changes with how I'm managing my stress? As the situation changes, as things develop, we can feel a little bit more stressed. And so, again, just kind of doing this on a regular basis is really important. You also want to limit how much you check the news. So, as the COVID-19 situation continues to develop, it's important to stay informed and check the news, but you want to think about doing it in a healthy way. And I say that because studies have shown that watching the news or hearing the news can actually contribute to your stress. And so you want to think about staying informed, checking the news, but doing it in a way where it doesn't necessarily contribute to your stress. And so the way you could do this is rather than having the news on in the background all day as you're cooking or as you're working, is set aside maybe 15 minutes in the morning. And if you feel like you need it, another 15 minutes in the evening just to check the news, get updated, what's the new and the latest information. And then turn the news off for the rest of the day. You also want to think about doing it in this manner because, as you may have noticed, news typically breaks first thing in the morning. And then what happens is the stories just repeat themselves over and over during the day. So is it really necessary for you to have the news on all day? Something to think about. You also want to think about if you have a news app on your phone. So some people have an app where it automatically notifies you when there's a breaking story or a breaking news story. And you want to think about, you're giving up that control of when and how you hear about the news. So is that really necessary for you if it's contributing to your stress? You also want to think about where you're getting the information that you're hearing about the pandemic. So there's lots of people on social media and on the internet pretending to be experts and giving false information about the pandemic or about ways to stay healthy. And so if you hear anything of that nature, you want to stop for a second and think about, is this based on any sort of evidence or science? Is it accurate? And try to turn to the more reliable sources that you know are based in science and evidence that are going to give you accurate information. You also want to read positive web pages. So try to look at other web pages on the internet that aren't related to the pandemic. These could be pages on hobbies or interests that you have that, again, can help you just kind of take your mind off what's going on. At the Regional Learning Center, we subscribe to the Good News Network, which is an email subscription that sends you an email every single day with 4 to 5 really feel-good, warm-hearted stories from around the world, and it's free. You could also take this time to learn something new if you feel like you'd like to. So it can help stimulate your brain and engage you in a different way, again, during this time. We've heard from a woman who attended one of our live webinars who said that she used an online video platform to learn how to play a musical instrument, which we thought was great. You also want to remind yourself what you can control. So during the time of the pandemic, it can feel like things are really out of your control. And so it's important to reflect back, what is in my control during this time? So these things could be, your decision to practice physical distancing from others, practicing hand hygiene, disinfecting surfaces, self-screening and staying home when you're unwell, deciding what to eat and drink, choosing your thoughts and attitudes, deciding to connect with family and friends, deciding how physically active you are, and then how you spend your time. This is just a short list, but we encourage you to take a moment and think, what's in my control here? Because it may be more than you realize. You also want to follow your regular schedule as much as possible. With schools closed and actually out for the summer now, and many working from home, it can be tough to keep that routine and stay motivated. So do your best to create a schedule so that everyone kind of knows what to expect through the day. So times for meals, for snacks, for activity, for fresh air, and for rest and relaxation. And lastly, you want to think about your spiritual domain. So turning to religion and faith, if that's helped you in the past. There's an online community for a lot of religious and faith-based practices, which you may want to turn to during this time. Meditation can help as well to reduce stress as it can calm the mind and the body. And there's lots of online guided meditations that you can use to help start your practice if you've never done this before. Appreciating nature can be really helpful as well. The sounds and the sights are just beautiful to take in. And again, just to remind you of that there's good in the world, that there's positive things to look forward to as well. Reflect also on what's meaningful and important in your life. This can help you distract you from negative thoughts. Even keeping a gratitude journal can be helpful as well, thinking of what's going well in your life, what are you thankful for, just to help you kind of reframe from those negative thoughts. And practicing mindfulness is important as well. Stay present and stay focused on the here and now. And I say that because our minds can really run away with themselves during this time, especially as the stories that we're hearing on the news, and just how much uncertainty there is moving forward. We can really kind of go down a rabbit hole. And so you want to just kind of take pause and to remember, you're in the here and now, and the situation's temporary. We're going to get to the other side of this at some point, but just kind of practicing mindfulness in that way. And again, there are mindfulness meditations online as well that can help you in that. And so there's lots of ways to practice self-care. Hopefully you've been practicing some of these things or some forms of self-care since the quarantine measures were first put into place. Hopefully we've given you some suggestions on different ways to practice self-care. And again, the idea here is to consider self-care in all four of these areas. Look after your holistic well-being. And it's important to prioritize self-care as well. So it's not selfish for you to be taking time. It's actually necessary for you to be able to care for yourself and for those in your life. So important to practice self-care. So with this, you also want to consider what signs you might be seeing in yourself that indicate you might not be coping well. These signs can include changes in your sleep and eating habits. Sleep is actually one of the first things that can be impacted when we're stressed. And so this could mean difficulty falling asleep, difficulty staying asleep, or sleeping too much. There could also be changes in your eating habits. So it could be that you're eating too much, eating too little, or choosing those comfort foods more often than not. There could also be changes in mood, where you're more irritable or more quiet than usual, withdrawing. So this could mean not calling people back or not reaching out to family and friends to connect. It could be excessive worrying as well, where you have this constant need to check the news. Also, there could be dependency on substances to cope, things like drugs, alcohol, and prescription medications. And so when we talk about using substances, we're not saying that having a glass of wine is a terrible thing. But the idea here is that when that glass of wine turns into two, turns into three, turns into the bottle, and it becomes kind of what's getting you through the day. You're so overwhelmed during your day. The only thing getting you through is the fact that you're going to have a glass of wine at the end of the day. That's what I need to get through my day. That's when it could be a little bit of a red flag. You could also be having negative thoughts, having trouble concentrating, even losing interest in life. So where you lose interest in activities that you once enjoyed, and even having muscle tension as well. So again, kind of like what I spoke about in the last slide, we can carry our stress physically in our bodies. And so these are some of the signs that you may not be coping well. Remember that difficulty coping can look different in everyone. So you want to reflect on what signs you see in yourself first that indicate that you're not coping well. Maybe it's sleep. Maybe it's muscle tension. What do you see first when you're stressed? It's important to know as well that we can be the last ones to know that we aren't doing well. So if you hear people in your life sharing that they've noticed changes in you or expressing concern for how you're doing, it may be time to practice some self-care or reach out for mental health support. And so places you can turn are like your Employee Assistance Program, EAP. This is a free service offered by some agencies for employees. What happens here is you dial a number and you are connected with someone who can provide you with support on a variety of different areas. So this could be mental health support. I've heard they give financial support and advice as well, and they also even give marriage counseling. So lots of different services that they can connect you with and that they can provide. So the service is completely anonymous. None of the information that you share when you connect with EAP goes back to your agency. They don't know what you talked about or what services you're accessing. All they know is the number of people that have called every single month. That's all. That's the extent of the information that they get. And so it's a great free service that you can turn to if your agency offers it. So I encourage you, if you are not sure if your agency offers it, connect with maybe a colleague or your supervisor or manager. Find out if if they do offer it, and look for the phone number. Another place you can turn is ontario.ca on their Find Mental Health Support page. And so you'll see the numbers listed on our slide. They are directly from the website. And so you can see there's a number for general mental health. There's also for referrals and information for young adults, for children, and for Indigenous people, as well as Indigenous women. And so call and reach out for any support that you need. And there's also going to be additional mental health resources listed below, so be sure to look there as well. Hopefully you've learned some ways to cope during this pandemic. And so before we just sign off here, at the bottom of this video, again, you will see the additional resources for mental health support. You will also see a link to an evaluation. So it'll take you 5 minutes. It's very quick. Just let us know what you thought of this webcast and any other topics you'd like to see in future. We also have our contact information of the Regional Learning Center listed below as well. So feel free to reach out if you have any other comments or questions. And with that, I thank you again and stay safe out there.